The Eccentric Genius. It's a classic movie trope.
It's a classic
also,
me trope, of course.
It is you. Yeah, well, that's why I'm talking about them, because I thought, William.
Yeah.
That's what I thought.
Eccentric Genius.
I aspire, but I'm not there yet.
Yeah,
I'm working on it. But, sometimes it's actually genuinely reflected in history.
Okay.
Like they're actually real ones. Like Pythagoras, the inventor of triangles.
Yes,
He was apparently quite weird.
And then he came up with the triangle.
Yeah, I mean, how do you invent a triangle? That's pretty genius in itself. But is it eccentric? He took a square and said, "I can make that less.
3 points.
I can make this more efficient." But he apparently had a bit of a religion and a bit of a cult following, and the two of the primary tenets were souls are reincarnated and beans are evil.
One
Actual
is big,
beans.
one is small. I mean, I get. You're a religion, and so you might as well say something big about the universe. You might as well say, okay, this is where we come from. This is where we're going to go when we die, and also something really wacky and weird, like
and that you can point to and make sure people adhere to. Like edible beans are shit.
I don't mind
There's
beans.
apparently a whole thing around it.
Beans are
I love a
fine.
bean. It's one of my favorite vegetables.
What's the thing that you're going to rule out in your religion? You're going to say
In my cult,
yeah.
I rule out all property except my own.
I'm
traditionalist.
That's a bit mean. That's very traditionalist and cult. A little bit mean. Okay.
So you got Lord Byron, the guy who invented Shakespeare. He did his first poetic works at 14.
Okay. Go.
I think he invented Shakespeare. He was famous.
I don't think he did. All right.
When he arrived at Cambridge, apparently
14 is not that young. When you tell me
published it, not wrote.
but
I wish
still-
girls liked me.
No, like Mozart did like all of the operas in the world by the age of 4 or something like that.
He'd finished. He invented opera.
He invented it. Yeah, I think 14 is late in the terms of child prodigy. That's
But he did other stuff that apparently people quite liked.
okay, like chin-ups
And
or
a
something.
lot, and over time. And he when he got to Cambridge, he had a dog, and they said, no, you can't keep a dog. It's against school rules to have a dog. And he was apparently desperate for a pet, so he scoured policies for animals that weren't expressly forbidden, and he found no references to bears. So allegedly, he got a bear.
No.
He would take it for walks on a leash through the uni. And when the admin people finally said, "Why have you got a bear?" he tried to find a way to get it a fellowship. I don't think that worked.
Is this true? Is this true? I mean, I want this to be true that Lord Byron had a bear at Cambridge.
It was on the internet.
Okay, all right.
Tycho Brahe or Bray, whatever you call him, he invented astronomy and planets.
Cool.
He also did a lot of stuff with precision astronomical measurements, and he was very good at that kind of stuff. And Johannes Kepler was his assistant, and he came up with laws of planetary motion.
Okay.
Tycho also had a live-in dwarf.
Yeah.
Whose tasks included sitting underneath the table when he had friends around for dinner. Like he paid this person to live there as a small person and do things like sit around the house and I assume be generally amusing.
Not cool. Not cool. Crazy. Something.
You can be eccentric and not cool.
Yeah, that's true.
And a genius.
And I get that during this time you might think, okay, that would be a great way to gainfully employ or keep underside of my table. Who wants to go to dinner when you're sitting around, there's 12 of you around the table having this fun conversation, but underneath there is a human. Like
small one though, they're not getting in the way of your feet.
Small or large. I don't want a human underneath the table where my knees are and my other bits are.
Well, unless they want to be. I mean, when you say why are they there, it's like
even worse.
Them to be.
Worse.
I pay them to be.
Even worse if they want to be. Like,
how's it worse?
No, it's way worse. If you're having
consent's worse.
As in
Are you hearing what you're saying right now?
No, are you saying okay, the dinner party guests want this? Okay, fine.
Oh no, I don't know about them. The dwarf was paid to be there, so that means they want to.
No, that's worse. It's worse if the dwarf wants to be there, like they would do it for free. I'm not happy with that.
You're saying all payment is coercion?
I don't know.
All wages are slavery, man.
I'm just trying to visualize this idea of someone sitting there having dinner.
Take a normal human, like a standing human you'd see day to day, and make them smaller.
I'm not worried about the dwarf. I'm not worried about the size of the person.
Okay, right,
what I'm saying is I'm the dinner party guest, and I've been invited over to Tycho, the Eccentric Genius's house for dinner.
Yes.
And underneath the table is someone who wants to sit underneath the table. I no longer feel comfortable eating my dinner. That's all. I'm thinking about me here.
There's no way. You've got your camera phone out. You're like taking sneaky little. Oh, it just went off. And then you'd be texting me. You wouldn't believe what's going on here.
I feel very vulnerable.
Fucking dwarf under the table, and I don't know why. So in maths, we've got another Alan Turing. Everyone's heard of Alan Turing. He's the guy who single-handedly won World War II.
Yes.
And did computing stuff.
Yep.
He apparently would chain his coffee mug to the radiator to prevent other people stealing it. And instead of replacing a faulty chain on his bike, he would count the number of pedal strokes he had cycled so that he could fix it before it broke.
Okay. I know roughly that you probably need to do less than 10,000 Ks to change the chain. Kilometers here. No, you should change your chain somewhere in the multi-thousand kilometer range. Depending on the bike, between say 5,000 and 10,000. That's going to be a fair few pedal strokes to just keep in your mind. I did another.
Oh, well, he had quite a mind.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
I was going to say a beautiful mind, but that's the wrong eccentric genius from around World War II, isn't it? He also apparently did strange things, like the way he'd have these weird kind of sideways skipping gaits and things when he wandered around the corridors of Bletchley Park. So, very good at what he did. Kind of strange. So he was a mathematician.
Look, perhaps your gate, perhaps my gate might be documented by history as being weird. I don't know.
No, mine's just sort of lumbering and lazy. Occasionally a spring because he's heading towards the pub, or at least his car. But look, none of these people seem, especially Alan Turing, as far as mathematicians go, none of them seem to hold a candle to this 20th century Hungarian fella who was one of the most eccentric and possibly the most published mathematician in history.
Welcome to the Wholesome Show, the science podcast for eccentric geniuses.
Yes.
And people who sit up the back of the classroom.
In which we ask the stupid questions, so you, dear eccentric listener, do not have to.
The Wholesome Show is me, Will Grant.
And me, Dr. Roderick Griffin. I also would like to have a bear, Lamberts.
You could just get one, maybe.
I don't know if it's as easy to do now as it was in Lord Byron's time. I've tried.
Sure. The Wholesome Show is brought to you by the Australian National Centre for the Public Awareness of Science.
And weirdos.
It's not that weird.
We're aware of weirdos and we're helping other people be aware. I mean, that's part of being aware of science.
Good weirdos are great. Good weirdos are great.
Yeah, good weirdo. No, it's certainly not a slight. I think weirdos are excellent. Without them, what would we talk about?
I don't know. Nothing.
So I'm going to wander up the front of the class, grab my chalkboard, and you should get comfy. So,
I am as comfy as I'm going to be.
Standing up at attention with respect.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Yeah, you should. You're a respectful human. So Paul Erdosh. You already know this story?
I know his name.
Do you?
Oh, I've heard of Erdosh.
Yeah, it's spelt like E-R-D-O with wacky stuff. S, Erdosh.
Erdos.
Yeah.
I'm just giving you the Australian
Everyone
spell.
says he's either pronounced Erdosh or Erdesh. So I'm going to say Erdosh.
Okay.
Hungarian. Born in Budapest, early 1913. His mother was called Anna. Father was called Lajos or Lajos. Oh, that's probably not Spanish. A lot of Spaniards in Budapest. They're both maths teachers. And his family was ethnically Jewish. I nearly said ethically Jewish. I suppose it can be both.
Yeah,
but they didn't really practice. They didn't run around and do the Jewishness.
Yeah. Okay.
Overtly.
Okay.
They weren't big into it, but they were ethnically.
Yeah. I
such.
get it. Of the people.
So when his mother was in hospital giving birth to Paul, both of his older sisters, 3 and 5, died of scarlet fever.
Oh. That's a very 2 steps backward, 1 step forward situation,
isn't it? Like I went to hospital with 2 daughters and I came back with 1 son and no daughters.
Look,
so that was
old timey diseases are fucked. Like, that's horrible.
It's horrendous. So
can you imagine coming? I mean, obviously he didn't know this. He's an infant, but that's that.
Then.
Yeah, but that's that cloud hanging over him the whole time. Not his fault, but it's just associated with the same time. Like,
yeah. I'm not saying you caused it, but didn't you?
You kind of, you tempted fate.
I had a child, and my other 2 died. I'm not saying it's your fault, or am I? People are saying. So his mother became super protective of him because he was the last kid.
Yeah.
Very worried about diseases and damage and everything else. So he was homeschooled throughout primary school. He had a private tutor, and he only went to high school.
Hang on, both of his parents were teachers, though.
Yeah. Well, they had jobs.
I know they had jobs, but they probably had the skills to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, they didn't want to. Okay, fair enough.
Seems not. Or maybe they had the tutor plus the teachers.
Okay, cool.
They were maths. Like if he said, I want to do poetry, I want to learn about Byron, the guy
fair enough. Okay, they got in a private tutor to get in that. Yeah.
They don't know how to do that.
Great staff student relationship ratio though.
Ratio, yeah, big time. So when he went to high school, it was kind of intermittent. It seemed, depending on what you read, it was like a year on, a year off, etc. So there was still some concern. But so that was a worry. But anyway, so when he was 1 year old, this is before high school. He didn't go to high school at 1. He was pretty smart. But
I don't know what genius is talking about. So yeah, fair enough.
So World War I kicked off when he was about 1. His father went into the Austro-Hungarian army.
This sounds like it's going to be a happy story.
That's all right. He was immediately captured by the Russians. I'm going to join the army. Off you go. And so he spent 6 years in a Siberian prison.
Great. I know that the other options during World War I were also not great.
They weren't excellent.
The trenches, not great. Many other places to die during the time, but 6 years in a Siberian prison.
No, they were the fun prisons. Everyone talks about them as being the fun prisons.
Yeah, and also 6 years, I assume, that's going from 1914 to 1920 in Russia, where there's a fair bit of other stuff going on in Russia, and I'm not certain that the authorities prioritized feeding and looking after prisoners.
No, they were into wine collecting and the harp.
Probably, and feeding
Much
prisoners.
Bigger. No, that's the third. Becoming a distant but still third. Yeah. So in prison, Paul's old man taught himself to speak English, mostly by picking it up in English language novels. So this makes me giggle. Like they had English language novels in this Siberian prison. I couldn't get into the detail on that, but I'm curious.
Oh, is it like it could be a Red Cross thing or something like that?
I'm sure they were huge in 1914 Siberia. Where's the Red Cross? We don't know what you mean. Boom.
Yeah. Also, picking it up via a novel. I think it's
novels.
Yeah, sure. It's a big jump to go. Okay, now I'm recognizing letters. He's Hungarian, so they're going to use a similar language alphabet. But then to go, all right, now I know all of those words.
He seemed to do pretty well because he finally got home after the war and he taught Paul to speak English.
Cool. All right.
Which is pretty impressive. But there were no native English speakers around, so apparently young Erdosh's grammar was exceptional, but his accent was, as they put it, very distinctive and could be difficult to understand.
Okay.
Which I gather, depending on who you ask, stuck with him for pretty much his whole life. So he had, let's at the very least say, a pronounced accent. But it became obvious that he was a maths monster when he was very young. So at the age of 3, he used to amuse guests by multiplying 3-digit numbers in his head.
Which, again, 3-year-olds should not necessarily be your party entertainment. But seriously, that'd be wild. Yeah. Okay, 3-year-old. He would have loved it. 3-year-old, give us some, what's 400?
794 and 263. A million. Done. Of course, they had no calculators and they didn't know if he was right.
Yeah, there you go.
They don't go into that.
Making up some numbers at the end.
48,301. That's amazing. Yeah, I can lie about numbers all night. He apparently also worked out the idea of negative numbers for himself when he was 4. It was something to do with, I don't know how it worked. There was a very brief reference to this, him subtracting 250 degrees from 100 degrees and coming up with the idea that there could be minus 150 and suddenly went, whoa, negative numbers.
There must be negative numbers. And he wasn't taught them, but he worked it out himself.
That's how the story ran. A few years later, he would amuse himself by doing things. He'd invent problems to solve, like how long would it take for a train to travel to the sun?
Who wouldn't? I often pondered that.
Yeah, I know. And then you kind of go, 4,500 years. How do you know? I can just tell.
No train tracks. Yes. No train tracks. So,
Yeah, no.
It's easy.
I mean, the train would run on, things burning.
It's easy.
Burn in space. I've read a book. When he was about 10, apparently his father explained Euclid's proof to him, and he said later on in his life, I was hooked. He heard about Euclid's proof, which is something to do with fashion, and that was it. He was totally hooked. So that's great. He showed his prowess early.
Are you going to give me any idea of what Euclid's proof is? You said it was something to do with fashion. I don't think it is.
No, it's not fashion. It's something. It's a proof. So it's something to do with strong spirits.
Cool math stuff is what you.
Yeah, cool math stuff. Exactly. Right. Euclid was he was a bit of a big deal.
Sometimes this podcast is intensely social scientist. intensely. When you get to the complex stuff, it's like, oh yes, yes.
You're being kind. It's intensely social.
Look,
I wouldn't go too far on the scientist part.
Look, intensely, yes. Right,
it's definitely intensely. So anyway, after World War I, Hungary was basically a political hot mess. It was briefly a democratic republic. Yay.
Yeah, those democratic republics after World War I didn't end up well. Yeah.
All did well except for Hungary.
Yeah, you think of the libertarian the freedoms of the Weimar Republic that lasted for not that long.
Minutes. Well, this one didn't last very long. It very quickly became a violent communist regime headed by Bela Kun, a lady, very unusual for the time. So, props to her. But that government was quickly crushed by an even more violent fascist regime.
Cool.
Headed by Miklos, I don't know, Horthy. Horthy was a great guy. He thought he saw Jews as supporters of the previous regime, so he'd actively oppress them.
So by great guy, you don't necessarily mean great in the good sense. You mean great in the terrible sense.
Not great in the traditional
sense.
Yeah, like great as in fuckhead. He also didn't like communists, which the previous regime was, at least.
That's common for fascists.
It is. Like, what we're going to do is help everyone. Fuck you. To be fair, once communists take charge, they tend to get a bit weird too. Anyway, because Erdosh's mum, Erdosh, she refused to go on strike when the communists were in charge because she was a school teacher. And she didn't want to go on strike because she wanted to keep teaching the children. Didn't give a shit about the politics.
Yeah.
But because the commies were in charge, etc., they decided that was bad. And also she was technically Jewish. Shit wasn't great for her. So she was fired.
Oh, okay.
When Horthy came in, and she basically lived in fear for her life because his men would roam the streets and kill Jews and communists.
Give me a year again. What are we, in the 20s or in the 30s?
Yeah, we're in the teens, yet? Getting into 1920.
Okay.
Just about to hit 1920.
Okay.
So in 1920, apparently he introduced anti-Jewish laws that were not dissimilar to the kinds of things Hitler got into about 13 years later. So that was pretty cool.
So he's like the prequel. He's like the...
Yes, yeah. He was Hitler's inspiration. If you're going to learn from someone, you should learn from a violent fascist.
Well, clearly that's what Hitler would have wanted to learn from. Okay.
Yes. Maybe he didn't know. He'd never thought of it. Before that, he just loved kittens. And then he realized that he could oppress people and be a total shit. So Jews were not allowed into uni at all in Hungary. So Paul couldn't go to uni. But then it turns out there was some national examination or a prize or a contest. And he won that, and it overrode his Jewness. So he was allowed into uni.
Was there some sort of clause? Like
yeah. You're so smart, it's as if you're not a Jew anymore. You can go to uni.
I mean, I know they were wacky bureaucratically back then that on ethnic demonstration. But seriously, if there was some sort of prize that will delete other reasons that we might reject you, but you're good enough at this point that we don't care anymore. Wow,
you're so good, it's like you're not even a Jew anymore.
That's gross.
I know, right? I know. That's what they call the competition. If you're good enough at this, it's like you're not even a Jew anymore.
Yeah. The become normal competition. Great, thank you.
Well, it's not that it's not normal to be Jewish.
No, I know. That's what they're saying. I'm putting their words.
God,
it's
all
their words.
Our Israeli listeners, boom, gone. Are they Jews? I don't know about geography. So he went to the University Pazmani Peter. He went to a uni in Budapest.
Yep.
For 1930 to 1934, and he left with a PhD in mathematics.
Hey, you did that in 4 years? So undergrad and PhD?
Yeah, although PhDs were easy back then. They didn't have to work like we did.
Oh, fair enough. I get it.
Particularly in maths. You just shout numbers out and they go, this guy's amazing.
Yeah, look at all those numbers he knows.
Call him doctor.
He knows big numbers and small numbers.
Yeah. Tell me one that has 6 digits in
negative numbers.
He made them up himself. He invented them. But anyway, so his brush, as they put it, with fascism affected him. It had an impact politically, obviously, but also linguistically. So apparently from this point forward in his life, anything he thought was inconvenient or oppressive was fascist. And one example was a colleague of his showed him a new litter of kittens. And Paul picked up the kitten, and the kitten said, "Screw you," and scratched him. And
he carefully
put the... Yeah, I know. And he put the cat back down, and he basically proclaimed the cat to be a fascist. His colleague said, "Well, how could you possibly know if the cat's a fascist?" And he said, "Well, if you were a mouse, you'd understand."
Look, maybe I think his colleague's in the wrong here. I think his colleague is maybe being a little bit pedantic. He might have just been using.
Imagine a mathematics colleague being pedantic.
Well, I'm just saying that Erdosh was not the pedantic one. He's just going, "Ah, you fascist!" Like he's using a word. His colleague's being a bit of a jerk here, saying,
"Yes,
precisely. How is the cat a fascist?"
I don't think it has a political position. I didn't mean that. You shit. So after his PhD in 1934, he fled because he didn't want to be under a repressive fascist government. That meant he had to leave his family behind, though, and he went to England. And he had a postdoctoral fellowship at Manchester. But he said he wanted to go to Germany, but to quote him, Hitler got there first.
Yeah, not good times.
He decided against it.
Not a good time to go to Germany.
Yeah, he decided against that. So while he was in England, he also worked in Cambridge, in London, in Bristol, and apparently other places. So he was a busy boy. He wandered around. And in Cambridge, he met a couple of dudes. He met a Polish guy called Stanislaw Ulam and G.H. Hardy, who I assume are both famous mathematicians, but I don't know anything about them. Apparently they're famous.
Moderately famous.
So he met them at Cambridge, Ulam and Hardy, and they liked him or they got on and blah, blah, blah. So by 1938, it was no longer safe for him to go back to Hungary because, Hitler owned Austria and that was pretty close and that wasn't cool. So there was no going back home. He went to Princeton. Mm-hmm. He got a 12-month fellowship at the Institute for Advanced Study. I love how nebulous a name like that is.
There's one near us here at ANU. So
Not anymore,
but
Yeah, we used to have the Institute. I liked that, but we killed it.
Didn't Einstein work at the Institute for Advanced Studies in Princeton?
And at ANU.
Well, I don't know about that, but
look, I'm going to say yes.
Okay, cool. Not part of this story. Fine.
Einstein's name will come up once more right near the end.
All right.
I'll just leave that teaser in there. You're going to be able to cope.
I don't think I will.
So excited. While he was at Princeton, he met another Hungarian called Paul Halmos. They only had one first name there for men. It was Paul. And Halmos reminisces about Erdosh, and he said someone would ask him a question in a field that he knew nothing about. He would then demand that the basic words were defined for him. And if it turned out that his set theoretical, in quotes, counting techniques were at all pertinent, he would just go and find the answer.
Well, hang on. No. He would go and find the answer. But
as in his noggin.
Oh,
not
okay.
Look it up. Not get on the 1930s internet.
Okay, give me some bit of the universe and give me the numbers associated with it, and I will work it out.
Maths problem. So like that.
Okay.
Here's an example we've all heard of.
Right.
A typical example is the dimension of the set of rational points in Hilbert space.
Yeah,
you know the one.
Yeah, I do.
That old story.
Yeah, it's.
Yeah, Hilbert space, dimensions of a set of rational points in Hilbert space. The details aren't that important to us mere mortals. So Erdosh was apparently a little vague about what Hilbert space was and didn't know what dimension meant.
Yeah, so which is fine. There might be bits of that discipline that he didn't know, and he's saying, "All right, give me it from first principles."
And he understood the prepositions between the words. He understood the word set, you know, rational. So apparently, this fellow called Harry Warman gave him the definitions, and before long, Erdosh solved this problem. If you're listening at home, the answer is 1. I don't know what the question is.
Oh, I could have said that.
Yeah, I know. And apparently it came out, it was published in the Annals of Something or Other in 1940. And so technically it was an important contribution to a subject that a couple of months earlier he didn't know anything about.
Okay. All right. So that's pretty good. So he stepped into an area he doesn't know anything about, and he's like, I solved it for you, fellas.
He's like, wait. What are the terms? Cool. Have you considered 1? And they're like, shit, it's 1. Let's publish that. This guy's awesome.
All this time. The
answer was one of the first numbers I learned. That's fabulous.
I do feel like the number of mathematical problems that we could go and propose to our friends over in the maths school and say, look, have you considered 1? I feel like there's got to be not very many problems left that we could solve enigmatically like that. My
understanding of maths is, the fact that you even say it's to do with numbers is an insult. It's like it's concepts. The answer is blue A.
Yeah, exactly. Post numbers. You get so good at maths. Numbers are terrible. They're a horrible.
They get in the way. They just get in the way.
Yeah.
What do you mean numbers in maths? I can't do maths with all these numbers in my way. So while he was at Princeton, Hungary decided to ally itself with Germany. So that was pretty sweet for him.
Pro or anti Princeton?
He was pro Princeton, but Princeton were not keen.
I'm just checking if Hungary had a position on Princeton. I just,
Oh, they didn't say. That telegram got lost.
Okay, all right.
But so did many others. So it meant he had no more contact with his family, and of course he couldn't go to Hungary.
His family were all still there in Hungary?
All still there.
Oh.
So they're allied with Germany. They're Jewish, at least technically, and they're living in Hungary,
I don't like
German
where that
ally.
bit's going.
Oh, no, it's fine.
Is it?
Some of his family lived, man. I'll get to that.
Is it his children that he had after the war?
Yes, in the Bahamas, eating coconuts. So he had his 12-month fellowship at Princeton came to an end, and they said, look, we're not going to give you another 12 months because Princeton found him, quote, uncouth and unconventional.
Are they code words? Are they code words for something?
Jewish? No. They're just literally, he was uncouth and he's not Princeton. So they only gave him 6-month extension instead of 12 months. And he said, okay.
They gave him an extension.
No, they gave him something.
Like quit whinging. We gave you something, man.
So Paul left Princeton.
All right.
Screw you guys. I'm taking my non-numbers and going elsewhere. And he started wandering. He'd go university to university or mathematician to mathematician, or he'd go conference to conference. He'd meet people, participate, meandered around basically.
Okay.
And this will be a theme that we'll get into in more detail a bit later. But he was a wanderer, a mathematical wanderer, as you are. And he really didn't endear himself to the US government, but it wasn't particularly deliberate. He was just a bit of a dunderhead when it came to that. So like in 1941, he was walking on a beach in Long Island with a Japanese guy, Shizuo Kakutani, and an Englishman called Arthur Stone. They wandered into an area that was restricted. It seems to be it was a secret radar facility, and they didn't see the no trespassing sign. So they were, of course, caught. They were split apart and interrogated. Why are you here, etc. And so the rendering that I found of Erdosh's interview apparently went something like this. Question: what were you doing walking on the beach? Erdosh, walking. Where are you going? Nowhere. What else were you doing? Talking. What about mathematics?
At some point, you should realize, hang on, this looks a little bit like we've been spying. It looks a little bit like this. Yeah. Maybe we should come up with at least a sensible story rather than just saying nothing. Nothing.
That's not how he rolls.
Wasn't here. I wasn't there. No. Just try and imagine what they're worried about.
But it's all true. Like, where are you going? Nowhere. What else were you doing? Talking. What about mathematics?
It wouldn't be hard. Like there's a version of Nowhere that says, "Oh, we parked our car at the start there. We just thought we'd walk down for 10 minutes, sit on the beach and chat, and walk back for 10 minutes. You know,
skim a few stones.
I don't mind being a tiny bit more eloquent just to give them something. They're trying to hunt out spies here.
He's a mathematician.
Don't be so literal.
Well, they got to, what are you talking about? Mathematics. What about mathematics? We were discussing a conjecture. What conjecture? It doesn't matter. It was false. So, that conversation's done.
It was...
Why would I even bother wasting my breath explaining
I will not explain it the second time to you how shit this conjecture was. Yeah, seriously.
It was outrageous in the first place. It annoyed me. It was boring. So apparently it's been referred to as after a friendly session with the police, they saw that no harm was done, and also they didn't intend any.
Look, I get that at some point, pretending to be a really certain type of mathematician, unconventional and uncouth, might not be the best way to have spies. So I get that at some point the authorities might just drop the case here. So
like this guy clearly is just not connected. So they let him go, but the guard who caught them still thought his behavior was odd, so reported the incident to the FBI. And the FBI later questioned him, didn't find any improprieties, but now he had a record with the FBI, which didn't help him later.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right.
The fact that the record existed. This is the early 40s at the time this was happening. Getting into the mid-40s, like 1943, Ulam, his old buddy from way back in Cambridge, tried to convince him to come and work for the US government at Los Alamos on nuclear weapons projects.
Yeah.
And so he said, shit, yeah, this sounds great because it would help smash the fascists running around Eastern Europe, and he wasn't into them.
Okay, yeah. They're all fascists with their cats and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea. But apparently he was quite laissez-faire in the interview. So he was too honest. He just basically answered. And so they said to him, for example,
what questions
would you ever wish to
ask?
return to Budapest? And he said, of course I would. But he didn't say, because my family are there.
Look, I want to help him a little bit here.
I know.
Like, it's not hard to provide a little bit more. Yeah, I loved Budapest. There's some great cafes. I love my family. I miss where I grew up.
Yeah. No, that makes you a Nazi.
Well, he's just there like, yes, I want to return because of secret reasons. I won't tell you my reasons. Like,
let me work on nuclear energy project, nuclear explosive project.
It's really not hard. Give people what they need to know here.
Did I mention he could be eccentric?
I know, but yeah, there's a version of eccentric. I'm just frustrated for him that I feel like his mother, and I'm just like, Paul, could you answer the question in a way that will be helpful here? Like,
well, his mother's stuck in Hungary. How could he get her advice?
Well, look, his mother should have sent him to school, and rather than having some weirdo private tutor home.
Well, she was worried he would just drop dead.
I get it.
His other two siblings did. I mean,
still, you know.
I know.
Putting people in a bubble ain't gonna stop that.
But he was also apparently a bit more deliberately contrary. So while in and around this interview time, he would deliberately do things like he'd see military security personnel in the vicinity of Publix, and he would say, "How's work going on the A-bomb?" It's like, you fucking clown.
You're a loose cannon, Paul.
Yeah, exactly. I want your badge and your gun and your mathematics.
Seriously. Look, not helping himself. No. So
he didn't get that job, which is shocking. Absolutely shocking. So he hadn't heard anything from his family from 1941 until Budapest was liberated by the Soviets in 1945. And apparently, obviously, Hungarian Jews had...
Crossing my fingers here, because I know that some tragedies might have happened.
Great. All fine. It's all fine.
I'm caring about Paul's family here.
Happiest mathematics and mathematician story you've ever heard me tell you.
Okay. Are they all right?
So, yeah, ish. So they really got bashed pretty badly, the Hungarian Jews. In 45, he found out that his father had died of a heart attack in 42.
Well, of normal of death during World War II, it's not the worst.
Well, I don't think heart attacks are great ways to die, but I've
no, but of death during World War II. You know, if you
starved to death, worse, tortured, gassed, yeah.
You know, heart attack. Who knows where the heart attack was, of course, but
it was in his heart. You're not really a doctor, are you?
No, I'm not that kind of doctor. Many heart attacks in my leg. Look, no, yes, you know what I mean.
I got a tummy ache in my head. His mother survived.
Okay.
His mother was alive. He had a cousin who had been sent to Auschwitz. She survived.
Okay.
But a mix, I don't know how many, 4 of his uncles and aunts were definitely murdered, and others of his more immediate and extended family were gone. So it's kind of, glass half full. His mum and his auntie at least are alive.
All glass has stuff in it.
Yes, it's not an empty glass. That's true.
Not an empty glass.
Yes.
When we're dealing with fascism in Europe in the middle of the 20th century. So
yeah, to be like, we were classified as Jewish, we were allied with the Germans, and anyone survived, my God.
Yeah.
You've got to count that as a win. Well, we know that now. So heading towards 1948, he was able to actually return to Hungary for a visit. And so he was reunited with some family and friends who survived, which is great. From there on, though, he bounced around between England and the US. So he'd take temporary jobs here and there, but he got one at the University of Notre Dame in 1952. And apparently had a lot of freedom to kind of go and explore with people, check shit out, etc. So it was quite a go and have a crack at maths mate sort of job. But he wouldn't take a permanent version, even though his buddies would say, come on, man, you're crazy. Take this permanent job. He didn't want to do it.
Why not?
He wasn't into that. He didn't want to be tied down, man. He was all about the maths.
Too unconventional. So what is driving him here? Like he
literally maths, and we're going to hear more about that. Literally maths. Maths is what drives him.
And there's no other, like he doesn't even want jobs, because jobs are like, why would I do anything other than just doing the maths?
I don't want to ruin the surprises.
All right, no, I'm cool. But that's
I bring you back to the eccentrics.
No, okay, but you did frame this episode by saying eccentric geniuses, that there are some rare ones.
And he is a rare eccentric
because it does sound like he could have got a pretty cushy appointment at name a prestigious university
anywhere
in America
anywhere. Yeah. Problem was he also had his personality, and I think that made it more difficult. So he didn't want to take the job. So in the early 50s, also going on in the US, good old Joseph McCarthy was getting involved in stuff. He had his tentacles all through the US psyche, finding communists in every nook and cranny. And of course, Erdosh fell under suspicion, and the FBI record wouldn't have helped.
Indeed, yeah.
Plus being, ethnically Jewish, but Hungarian, therefore, German, blah, blah, So it was tricky. And also, but he didn't help himself. So he was at a conference in Amsterdam in 1954. He was coming back into the US. US immigration said to him, "Tell us what you think about Marx."
Okay, trick question here. Paul, really? Paul, yeah. Slow down here. Slow down.
No, he did fine. He did fine. He said, "I'm not competent to judge, but no doubt he was a great man."
Okay.
Now, this is 1954 America, Joe McCarthy time. So that wasn't a great answer.
Particularly if you tick a bunch of other boxes.
Yeah, and he just say shithead. That would do. They wouldn't like the cuss word, but they would cope. Then he got more questioning about whether he would ever return to Hungary. And he said, "Look, I'm not planning to visit Hungary now because I don't know whether they'd let me back out. So far, I'm only trying to go to England and Holland."
Yeah, that's not a bad
They wanted
answer.
to hear no. They just wanted to hear no.
Why?
Give them that.
That's dumb. That's dumb.
McCarthyism, man. McCarthyism.
No, I know, but do you ever want to go? Do you ever want to go to your home country again?
Yes. Oh, communist.
Yeah. Okay. All right. I know that those bureaucracies.
It's fair to say he was operating in a realm of paranoid fuckwits, but he really didn't have the awareness to think
and he didn't
about
help
the context
himself
at all.
He didn't help himself.
Context wasn't his strong suit. So now he started to have little quirky problems with the American authorities. You just poured a beer all over your face there.
It's all over everywhere.
Did any of it go in the glass?
Yeah, one bit. There
you go. Yeah, that's good. Good on you, champ. So they started, the US would refuse to give him entrance visas, so he spent a lot of the 1950s, or most of them, in Israel. And then apparently he and the US State Department fell into this little kind of dance, as I would describe it. They would refuse to issue him an entry visa. Then the mathematical community would circulate a petition saying, "We've got to have this guy at conference X, Y, or Z."
Yes.
And every now and then they would briefly relent and let him in, but usually they wouldn't. So this apparently happened a number of times where they'd go, "Come on, this guy is maths.
He's the good guy."
Yeah, he's so maths. And then for some reason in 1955, he was given literally a one-of-a-kind Hungarian passport that allowed him to freely enter and leave Hungary. And I don't know why.
A one-of-a-kind? So Hungary gave him this?
Yeah, for some reason. So he was allowed to pop in and out of Hungary, and I don't know why.
Oh.
And, maybe that's another 17 episodes. But
maybe it's the maths. Maybe it's the maths. They loved his maths too. They wanted some maths.
The Eastern Europeans are very intellectual and volleyballing people.
I do know that Hungarians are super keen on their intellectuals.
Mm.
And maths,
that whole area.
Very keen on it. Yep.
Many of the places, including my father's home country, that were taken over by the Ruskies, were super keen on the intellectuals. Okay, so by this point, so I got a US visa in late '63, so he finally could get back in the US. It was all clear. So he's back in the US. Shit's great. So he's gotten to the point now where he's basically a vagabond maths guy. He moved from one university to the other. He would kip out in other mathematicians' homes.
Did he live? Did he live anywhere? No. Did he have a house?
No, he didn't have a house. He had no home. And I love, depending on who you read, the way they work this, his constant travel forced him to adopt a minimalist approach to personal property. But you could argue he already had a minimalist approach to personal property, so the travel just was easier. So he was quoted as saying, "Some French socialists said that private property was theft. I say that private property is a nuisance."
I'm believing it from what he's demonstrated.
You love that.
I'm assuming he is living with a fairly small suitcase. Like he's got.
Funny you should say that.
Okay, all right.
He traveled. They say traveled. He lived out of two suitcases. Both were half full. One had clothes. The other had maths papers.
I got a genius maths problem for you here. Okay, Paul. You have 2 times half an amount of suitcases. How many suitcases do you need?
Theoretically, how many suitcases could that be? 11? No, Paul.
Yes, 11 elevenths of a suitcase. Like, this is what I'll do. I'll have one shirt. Seriously, Paul, if you put 2 half
Work
a suitcase
with me. Look at me.
One suitcase, that might be easier.
Yeah, no. Maybe he just wanted to balance out the weight between his two scrawny arms.
Yeah, he's got his arms, all right.
Yeah. So here's where we really start to hear more about him. So he never really cared about or gave a shit about day-to-day existence. He really never picked up basic skills most people take for granted. So one colleague, collaborator, whatever, called Janos Pach said, once I spent a few days with Paul, and by that he meant Paul hung in his house. When I entered the kitchen in the evening, I was met with a horrible sight.
Okay.
I'll pause to let your imagination run.
I think there's a lot of places I'm going. Is he washing in the kitchen sink? Is he doing? Yeah, he's making something weird. He's cooking up something crazy.
The floor was covered by pools of blood, like red liquid.
That's not good.
The trail led to the refrigerator. I opened the door, and to my great surprise, I saw a carton.
Paul's hiding in the fridge.
Yes.
No.
There's a carton of tomato juice on its side with a gaping hole. So he must have felt thirsty, and after reflecting on it, decided the best way to get the juice out was to stab it with a big knife. So he basically stabbed the carton, poured some juice, and then laid it down on its side in the fridge so it didn't leak after that. So, he's thinking it through.
My God. All right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Great house guest.
So he doesn't know how a lot of the world operates. Like,
I've only just begun.
I get that he only wants a bit of the can. Like, you don't want to drink the whole can.
No.
Cool. That's fine. There are ways to open it and not pour it on the floor. And there are also ways to clean up after yourself. You can be a genius. You can be a genius and clean up after yourself.
And use a towel.
Yeah, that's not a hard bit. Like,
well, see, this proves you're not a genius, not mathematically.
Maybe.
It turns out he lacked the ability to prepare anything but the most basic of foods, even that. And he said, it was said he couldn't even boil water for tea. And he once said, I can make excellent cold cereal, and I could probably boil an egg, but I've never tried. This is as well and truly grown up. And he reminisces at the age of 21, that was when he first buttered his own bread. And
Why?
he said, yeah. I remember clearly, I had just gone to England to study. It was tea time and bread was served. I was too embarrassed to admit that I'd never buttered bread before. I tried. It wasn't so hard.
No, it's not. I do like that he's very proud of his ability to make excellent cold cereal, though. Like,
to be fair, he didn't say. Oh, he did say excellent. I was going to say, he's excellent cold cereal. He can open a box and pour shit out.
I can pour the muesli out of the packet. Look at me. Me. Cornflakes. Excellent. I delivered on.
Genius. But his life wasn't completely unstable.
Okay.
So
are you going to show me any aspect?
Sorry?
I'm just wondering what bit would be stable.
He married 9 women and they had 12. No, nothing like that. He was at a number theory conference, and they are renowned hothouses of party.
Yeah.
In 1963, and he met a guy called Ronald Graham, and they began collaborating on math stuff. Graham, sorry?
Yeah, Graham's not the inventor of Graham's number.
Yes.
Oh, I don't know. He might be.
I don't know.
The last name Graham.
Well, it's a fair bet that whoever invented it was called Graham. That's true. You did the Graham's number thing. You should know.
I don't remember first names. I remember last names. I'm a last name person.
What's your first name? Will?
I don't know.
You don't need to. You got other people for that.
He met a guy, Ronald Graham.
Graham set aside a room in his house for Erdosh so he could live there when he wanted to, and he also would store Erdosh's papers. Further, it seems that he actually sort of acted as his secretary / manager. So, as it's been put, Erdosh did not concern himself with trivialities like money. So Graham had to. And Graham said, I signed his name on checks and deposited them. I did this for so long, I doubt the bank would have cashed a check if I hadn't endorsed it for him. He really didn't get it. Another biographer claims that the money thing may have been a ploy so he didn't have to worry about it, but that's hard to verify. But there's a great story where he caught a cab from Indiana University to Purdue, which is about 100 miles, so 6 kilometers. And when he arrived, he, quote, realized he had no money, so he threw himself on the mercy of the maths department. And apparently the chair of the department had to whip around to get the cash to pay for the 100-mile cab ride.
I'm very happy with throwing yourself on the mercy of the maths department.
Can you imagine? I'm here. I caught a cab.
Can you guys pay for me? It might be like it's a $400 fare.
Yeah. How much? How far did you go? 100 miles.
Yeah, like I went a long way.
So basically, this man's life was entirely devoted.
I do feel like I do feel like arriving in a different city to your own. In a taxi from a long way away, and then just declaring, "I throw myself on the mercy of the maths department." I feel like that's a life goal. That one right there.
It goes under the standard cultural always help the crazy guy.
Yeah. Is that a standard cultural thing?
Oh, it is now.
Oh, there you go. All right. Always help the crazy guy.
The billions of listeners to the Wholesome Show are now going, yep.
Always help the crazy guy.
That's how we know you're a listener, because you care. So his life was completely devoted to maths. So he'd travel from uni to uni, as I said. He'd hang out with different mathematicians, and he'd work until whoever his collaborator was totally exhausted, and then he'd move on to the next one.
What are they, just staying up all night doing maths until
until
the normal human is like, I'm tired now. I have to. And Erdosh is like, all right, I need a new maths collaborator, and go with someone else.
Yeah, almost literally. He wouldn't quite suffer anything that would detract from the effectiveness of him as a mathematician. So he had low social graces. So maths was his first priority. If you wanted to collaborate with him, then you had to, at least for a while, adopt that as a priority. So he didn't give a shit about other people's schedules. It just didn't matter because it got in the way of maths. So apparently Paul Hoffman, who I think wrote one of the biographies of this guy, he said, when the name of a colleague in California came up at breakfast in New Jersey, Erdosh remembered a mathematical result he wanted to share with him. He headed straight to the phone and started to dial. His host interrupted him and said, it's 5 a.m. on the West Coast. And Erdosh said, great, that means he'll be at home.
Exactly.
And rang anyway. So he's thinking.
Thinking a bit. He's thinking where the other person is. Just not a little bit.
And will they be there to take my call to discuss the maths? Apparently, he thought it was important to know some contact information of collaborators, but not too much. So he knew probably surnames and their phone numbers. And so Peter Winkler, who is a maths guy, says he called me at the time. He called me all the time. And he would say, is Professor Winkler there? And he knew everyone's phone. He knew every mathematician's phone number, but I don't think he knew anyone's first name. I doubt if he would have recognized my first name, even though I worked with him for 20 years. The only person he called by his first name was Tom Trotter, who he called Bill.
Well, indeed. So, why is he collaborating so much? Like,
we're going to get to that.
Okay, good. Because if I was to diagnose his instincts here, he is single-minded in his love for the maths. It seems like he could probably do a lot of this on his own. Like, he seems to be maths talented beyond many of these people.
Part of his eccentricity was he actually liked to collaborate, or at least saw value.
Okay. All right.
This is one of the things that's kind of weird about him, and that will definitely
No, I get
soon. So many of his collaborations were handled by mail, and because he dealt with so many people, he'd sometimes forget what they look like. So on one occasion, he met a mathematician at an event, and he said, "Oh, where are you from?" And the mathematician said, "Vancouver." And he said, "Oh, you must know my good friend Elliot Mendelsohn." And the reply was, "I am your good friend Elliot Mendelsohn."
Cool. Well, there you go. He remembered you.
Yes.
Elliot, calm down here. He remembered.
And he got the first name.
Yeah, exactly. You are in the hallowed circle right here. He remembered your name. Just because he didn't associate it with your face right there. Calm down, Elliot.
It's just, I wonder, is part of the genius the fact that he was shit at everything else? Apparently not. No, he did well. So I'm just pouring out a delicious Helios bitter orange beer because, God, they're good. So in 1964, his mother was 84 and she started traveling with him and taking care of him, as you do with your 84-year-old mother.
Yeah.
And apparently they were really close. Like he and his mother were not in a weird way, as in.
It was just nice. It's just nice.
Really,
it's okay. It's okay. You
really
can say
close.
They were really close, and you can say it's a mother-son relationship that's close.
It's this adult son and his mother.
It's fine. It's fine.
Inseparable.
It's fine.
Totally normal.
But
you and your mum.
No one is assuming this is weird.
Well, it's not that weird. And apparently they kept traveling. So this is in 64, and they kept traveling together until 1971, when she was poorly diagnosed with a bleeding ulcer and died. And he was not impressed. He didn't like her dying. And so apparently it affected him for years. He would still occasionally randomly bring it up. 5, 6, 10 years later, someone would say, "You don't seem happy." And he's like, "Oh, I miss my mum," which is sad. It's terrible.
Of course, yeah. It's a significant relationship in his life.
Yeah, there's it. I mean, he didn't have anything else. And so he immediately after her death, he tried to basically, stabilize himself and find something to do. So he buried himself in maths, and he would.
Of course. I mean, what were you going to say here?
Football, juggling. He became a juggler. So he'd apparently do like standard 19-hour days on maths. And how did he do that? Well, antidepressants and then amphetamines.
Oh, did he? Oh,
yeah.
Okay. So it's not just a monomaniacal desire for maths. There's some weird stimulants in there as well.
No, but that's why he was taking the stimulants, though, because of the monomaniacal desire for maths and the loss of the loved one in his life. So it got to a point where his friends started to worry about his drug use, and Graham, our buddy from earlier, in 79, said to him, "I bet you $500 you can't stop taking amphetamines for a month."
Cool trick there.
Yeah, $500. So Erdosh said, okay, and went cold turkey for a month.
And won the money and then went straight back on them?
Yeah, and at the end of the month, he said, look, you've showed me I'm not an addict, but I didn't get any work done. I'd get up in the morning and stare at a blank piece of paper. I'd have no ideas. I was just like an ordinary person. You have set mathematics back by a month. And then he started taking amphetamines again.
Great way to demonstrate there. Like, it's a great way to really demonstrate that you need the drugs. You need the drugs there, mate, to do what you want to do.
And I just love the call. And the funny thing with him, it seems to be when you make the claim that you've set a whole discipline back by a month because I've been out of it for a month, it's not hyperbole. It sounds like that wasn't entirely untrue.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like Donald Trump saying I've done the most for any black person of any president, which is just absolute balls. This was actually.
But you're saying Erdosh was okay, fair enough.
There's another classic dude who was reviewing biographies of his life, and he said, "Look, most of my stories of Erdosh are personal. So I was at Penn State and I was in charge of a public lecture series. Our first speaker was Erdosh at a time when he was at the height of his public fame, so he was known. There were 2,000 people at the talk.
That's cool.
And as this reviewer says, I, of course, gave him a flowery introduction, telling of how I carried all of Erdosh's worldly possessions in a flight bag in one hand. And, that was the kind of guy he was. And as he put it, the great man walked, indeed limped, to the front of the room and immediately took off his shoe and talked about how his foot was sore and had been bothering him for weeks.
Cool.
I know.
That's a great public talk.
I know. A couple of weeks later, after it was over, apparently...
Did he talk about anything else?
It's not clear. I assume he must have, but it definitely, when someone who's this famous person walks
the shoe thing gave an impression. Okay.
Yeah, it's kind of, all I'm thinking is, is it professor or hobo kind of stuff here?
Yeah. No, he is right in the middle of that mix.
Right in the middle. So a few weeks later, after he'd left, this guy says, my phone rang and I picked it up and I heard in a long, deep, heavily accented drawl, Erdosh, my foot is much better.
Is this how he announces himself?
Yeah. not even I am, this is, or how you going, Erdosh, my foot is much better. Weeks later.
Takes a little while to pass that, so fair enough. That's good.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that his foot is better. That's nice.
Well, yeah, that's good. It's good for him, So basically, all he gave a shit about maths. He gave a shit about people doing well at maths and his mother.
That's three
How
things.
did he interact with everyday people?
Is it well?
Well, mostly he kind of didn't.
Yeah, okay.
Apparently he had, and this is my definition or my description.
I'm assuming he didn't do the grocery shopping very much.
What's the groceries?
Yeah, indeed. He didn't do the clothes shopping very much. He
didn't need to. Well, this is actually exactly comes to this. So that they describe it differently, but basically he had what I would call a Steve Jobs level of warping reality around himself. People would just sort of move to it.
They would do the things that are necessary.
Yeah.
If he needs a new shirt, then a shirt would appear.
Yep. He didn't have to deal with food. Other people dealt with that. He didn't have to converse in normal ways to people who didn't have doctorates in mathematics.
Surrounding your world with the only people you converse with doctorates in mathematics people. Like that they are my minions. I need those people as my minions to do my bidding. Wow.
It reminds me of a classic Wesley Snipes movie where it was all about parachuting, and there was a guy called Swoop, and he didn't talk to anyone who hadn't done skydiving.
Well, why would you?
I mean, obviously. Fucking bad. I mean, Wesley Snipes, obviously a legend of the cinema, but that movie...
Somewhat.
What was it called?
Draft. Wesley Snipes has done an astonishing array of bad movies.
Yeah, but he's consistent. So Erdosh basically separated himself from what he would call trivial beings, aka non-mathematicians. And he would do this not only using impenetrable jargon of maths, but also through his use of his own special descriptions for people. Women were bosses. Men were slaves. Children were epsilons.
Epsilons.
Epsilons. Obvious next step.
Well, what does that mean? I'm understanding what he means by bosses and slaves.
Yeah.
Epsilons.
Epsilon, I don't know. I assume that's sort of a level of an order in maths.
He's not some weird Scientologist on the side. I can't imagine he would
you can be both.
clock with that.
No, I don't think give a shit about religion. People, when they were born, they weren't born, they arrived. When they died, they left. The word died was used to describe people who stopped doing maths. Yeah.
Yeah, he's got to get a certain definition here. Like this is
yeah. When he didn't lecture, he preached.
Did his mum do any maths? I mean, she was a maths teacher. So
yeah, not after she died. She slowed down a bit on that.
Did she left? You mean she left, or did she live and die?
Well, you kind of, if you leave, you kind of die as well, don't you?
Yeah, you do.
But no, she wasn't like a mathematician like he was. She was just a maths teacher. Yeah, so he didn't lecture, he preached. And he would declare when he would turn up at a place or when he was ready to do maths, he would say, my brain is open.
Okay. Well,
I assume like open for business or something.
Yeah. Fair enough.
So he was described as a bit below medium height, 5'6". So
I wasn't imagining him being tall.
Not a big guy. He was light, 130 pounds, which is
of course
about
he is, because he doesn't eat.
Well, he's got amphetamines though.
He has amphetamines and he eats occasionally for nutrition only.
Yeah,
like, this is not a flavor guy. He's not fixated on the flavors, the gourmand approach to the world.
Oh, I suppose you can keep thinking when you're chewing in theory. His buddy Ulam said his eyes indicated he was always thinking about mathematics, a process interrupted only by his rather pessimistic statements on world affairs, politics, or human affairs in general, which he viewed darkly.
But he did read a little bit about the rest of the world.
Like, no one said read, but he had opinions and thoughts.
Well, he must have engaged a little bit to say, okay, the world is doing this, the world is doing that.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just 100% maths, but he seems to be 95%.
It could have been coloured from World War II, and that might have been it from that point.
It's kind of like World War II was a big event, so fair enough.
For some. I mean, I only exist because of World War II, but what's the big deal? Whatever.
We all only exist because of World War II.
No, only me. Don't be a trivial being. Be a mathematician who exists because of World War II.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. All right.
Apparently his peculiarities are so numerous, it's impossible to describe them all. He lived on a diet consisting largely of caffeine, antidepressants, and amphetamines. Sweet.
I'm just processing that. I get it. Yeah. Was there any nutrition? Did he ever poo?
Well, I'm gonna check that. The follow-up episode is definitely going to be about the bowel habits of famous eccentric genii.
Sure.
He famously defined a mathematician as a machine for turning coffee into theorems.
All right, I know that mathematicians would be very keen on that concept.
Sure.
And they're like, we're so cool.
Although, getting into today's terms, it wouldn't be coffee; it would be caffeine. However, it could be administered. He also apparently had a skin condition that caused him to wear only silk underwear and had to wash his hands more than 50 times a day.
Oh, I'm guessing that's not quite a skin condition.
You'd certainly get one.
I'm guessing that's a brain condition, not a skin condition.
Well, it would give you a skin condition,
which might associate very strongly with all all of his other behaviours.
I think you're going out on a limb here.
I don't want to psychologize at a distance.
I'm embarrassed for you.
I think we might have a little bit of some of the diagnosis here.
Well, it is. Yeah, I diagnose him as.
I do. Oh wow, that's so as someone who is not bothered by worldly possessions at all, and his entire life can fit into 2 half suitcases.
Yes. Not one whole
Still
one.
stuck on that one. Still stuck on. But it's 2 half suitcases full of silk undies is a nice way to dial this up a little bit. Like if you go, no, I don't care about worldly possessions except for my silk underpants.
My silk undies and my soap and my papers.
I feel lost in my cotton underwear at the moment, and
everything hurts. Everything burns.
This is horrible. This is horrible. Listener, you feel horrible right now, and you need to upgrade to silk.
I have to go wash my hands. As he got older, he would start to award himself letters after his name. So he became, one of them was PGOM, poor great old man.
So he's having jokes. This is his jokes to himself.
Probably. When his mother died, he added LD for living dead. When he was 60.
Your mum died. That does happen. It does.
Well, I definitely added letters after my name after that event. It was like, well,
just do it.
OBE.
Just do it.
Though.
Next time you someone asks for your CV, you're Rod Lamberts LD, and they're like,
I'm going to go OBE and what's the other fellow of the Royal Australian College of Physicians. Because why not?
Look, don't fake things, but just make them up. Like,
don't fake them, make them up. At 65, he added AD for archaeological discovery.
He means he's old.
Obvious.
He's old.
Yeah, I think so. He had opinions on God.
Okay, cool.
He considered God was malicious. God gives us colds, hides our glasses and papers, sends us bad weather and traffic jams, and most importantly, is delighted if we fail to do something good when we have a chance. So he labeled God SF, or the Supreme Fascist.
Sure. Okay. Fair enough.
That's how he rolled.
Yeah.
The only known hobby that anyone reported on, I only found this in one source, was Go, the Japanese board game.
It's a very maths game.
Isn't it? I think it's still the only game that computers can't beat humans at.
No, computers can. Like it was 2 years ago. Like it was a year or two ago. It was a big moment. Like
God, I read old shit.
Chess was maybe 10, 15 years ago, but Go was just last year. That computers could finally beat humans at. I don't know. There's bullshit. There's a whole bunch of other games that computers can't beat humans at.
Like rock, paper, scissors.
Fist fights.
Oh yeah, I'll punch on with a computer any day.
Yeah, exactly.
Line them up.
Yeah, exactly.
Line them up.
Yeah. Except for those bosses.
Kick a ball, smart ass.
There's plenty of games. Plenty of games. It's just got to go for a higher level game. The game of
Twister.
Yeah, Twister. The game of life. That one where you hit community chest.
What's the one where you do swear words and stuff that's funny? Cards Against
Humanity. I doubt that computers can beat humans at that.
You'd always be able to tell it was the computer who's like that. That's the computer.
And then there was a funny line. Say the funny line now.
Make joke. Insert unexpected non sequitur.
Yeah, I think that the challenges that computer scientists have set are a fairly narrow range of games. I think there are a fair few that humans still win at.
Well, I'm glad. Now, this may give you the impression that he was a misanthrope, which obviously means werewolf.
No, indeed it doesn't. Hater of humanity.
Yeah, and he was neither a hater of humanity nor a werewolf. So we know he spent a lot of his life traveling around.
Well, this is what I was asking before. Why does he spend so much time actually with people? Like he seems.
Well, we're going to roll into that.
Okay.
We're going to roll into that. This is what's interesting. This is why again he's eccentrically eccentric. So he spent his life traveling around unis, carrying the suitcase. He apparently mostly wore sandals and an old shitty suit. He would arrive at new places and basically, as they put it, bring the mathematical news. So he'd arrive at new universities, I bring maths news. He would pose problems. He would inspire the locals with brilliant ideas, and then he'd leave in a few days, leaving these exhausted people behind him to work out stuff.
That's so cool, though. Like, I get it. If you are the maths news, that in some way that you are so up with the times that you're kind of ahead of like the journal printing press and stuff like that you can go to this university and say, okay, you should pay attention to this. Like, that's amazing.
It's wild. I mean, he really was maths. They say he had an open mind, and his ability to see the unexpected, his willingness to wrestle with complications without help, made him a welcome guest.
Did he like listen to other people's presentations? I mean,
he would, but if he didn't like them, and I'll give you an example of that in a moment. If he didn't like them, he'd fix them.
Okay, no, fair. No, of course, but he's not just going there to lecture and then leave.
Me.
Yeah, no, but he's going there to at least listen a little bit and say, oh, but you've got a flaw here or got a flaw here.
Yeah, I don't know. Like the impression I got was he wouldn't go there to learn. He would go there and go, here's what I reckon. What's going on? If it interests
but I guess what I'm saying is that that by listening to their presentation, this is how he could be maths. Is that he's going around to all of these departments and he's getting an awesome conference from each of these departments one by one. Go to Princeton, go to Yale, go to Oxford, go to Cambridge, go to wherever the other great math schools in the world.
Charles Sturt.
And indeed, and they pay attention to you and they give you all of their best theorems, and you're like, okay, that's cool. Here's how you could correct it by the
he gets maths crack wherever he goes.
He's the leading blogger of maths.
He was also quite generous. I mean, whether he realized it or not. So he was super productive, but he was basically like a roving director of mathematics. Like he'd go to places and he would seek out young prodigies. He would collaborate with them deliberately. He would try to guide them in ways that made sense mathematically, so they become better members of the maths community. But he said now and then there were instances where some of his proteges became distracted from maths and obviously died.
Yes, died. Dead maths.
But he wasn't really into money, so he'd get stipends and stuff and lecture fees, and he'd mostly give them away to relatives, colleagues, strangers, students.
Because his suitcases are half full. I mean, what more do you want?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Seriously, there's no more room.
Yeah, it's like what is it? 1984, he won the Wolf Prize, which is apparently big, and it was 50 grand. 1984, 50 grand.
Yeah, it's basically $100 million now.
Yeah, at least, and that's US.
Yeah.
Oh no, pounds. US is going down. Half of the money he gave to a second cousin he hardly knew because they needed money.
That's not really a charity. Like, I'm giving this to world peace and a second cousin.
He set up a scholarship in Israel.
Okay.
In the name of his parents, and he apparently ultimately only kept $750 of the 50 grand. So he wasn't a shithead. Like, he wasn't deliberately angry with people. He was literally just totally maths.
He was that maniacal. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, he was just that much maths. And so I said at the opening, he was possibly the most published or prolific maths guy in history. You probably have forgotten because there's so many stories about him, but this is something that, really attracts attention. So we'll talk some numbers. He was productive well into his 80s. He died in his 80s, spoiler alert.
Yeah.
But so from 1932, he was 18, he published his first paper until 2003, almost 7 years after his death, papers were still being published by him.
Whoa, 7 years after his death.
After his death, there were that many.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
You don't want to, but in fairness to the collaborators, if you're working on a paper and you know that your colleagues over there are working on a paper with Paul dies, and you go, shit, I don't want to be the last person. I don't want to be the last person to churn this through because this is going to be embarrassing. Are you the slowest person to work through it?
Oh, we'll get to that. So on average, apparently, an above average mathematician will publish 20 or so articles in their career.
Mm-hmm.
A really good one will go 50.
Yep.
Guess how many Erdosh is credited as being an author of?
51.
More than 1,500.
Yeah, okay, cool.
1,521 academic papers as of February 2004, which makes him the most prolific mathematician apparently ever.
Wow.
And he had two secrets. One, he was super smart. And so
the
the
second one's about his typewriter. It was a really good typewriter.
Yes, he had a really good typewriter and great chalk.
Yeah.
But so he was a genius. There's no one's doubting that. So there are stories, all kinds of stories, and one of them was from a guy called George Purdy, another mathematician. In 1976, we were having a coffee in the maths lounge at the Texas A&M. What a lounge! There was a problem on the blackboard in functional analysis, a field that Erdosh knew nothing about. I happened to know that two analysts had just come up with a 30-page solution to the problem, and they were very proud. Erdosh looked at the board and said, "What's that? Is that a problem?" I said, "Yes." He went up to the board, squinted at the tersely written statement. He asked a few questions about what the symbols represented, and then he effortlessly wrote down a 2-line solution. If that's not magic, what is? 2 lines.
Look, and I can believe. Can you imagine though? Seriously, you got this guy. He's like a wandering sage coming around to, and you're all like mortals. You live normal lives, and you're good at your job. You do your maths, and it's all okay. Everything, you're working hard on your theorems and you get your 30-page theorem and that's really cool. And then there's this wandering sage who one day drops in, and it's not like you're not all going to drop everything to listen to this guy. And he comes in and he goes, oh yeah. Here you go.
What's that mean?
Here you go.
What's that mean? I don't even get that. Cool.
Like,
that's what makes it even worse. I don't even know what those two things are.
And you know that none of the rest of the people in this story that don't even have names, all the men and women of these maths departments around the world, none of them are dumb. Like that, they are smart people working hard on these things. To have some wandering sage just step in and go, like, I guess I wanted to try and have a sociological understanding of this guy. Is it because he's visiting so many places that he hears so many different ideas? But I guess there is something different about that. Like there is something different where he can step
Oh no, he's a
and
genius. Like he clearly his maths brain was.
And I don't believe in genius. And this is the thing. I just.
It's okay, man.
No, I just.
It's okay.
Thank you. I just think in general, mostly it's a quirk of society and how society. But this guy sounds like he is.
It's like 111% perspiration, and minus 4% inspiration,
and quitting lasts forever. Pain is temporary. Look,
it's his weakness leaving the body.
There you go. I do. There is something that is unique. Like I just.
He was a smart guy. He basically, and he was described as he was a solver of problems, not a builder of theories. So the problems which attracted him most were problems in these are terms one term I don't. Combinatorics.
Yeah, no,
graph
definitely.
Theory, and number theory. Graph theory and number theory, and
that's the 3 I was going to guess.
Ditto. I mean, well done. I only got 2.
That's cool. Combinatrix does sound like a
it's something the Borg do in Star Trek from 1999.
No way. Combinatrix is
That's the name. I am Combinatrix of the Borg.
No, it's an S&M name for like you're a maths professor by day and you're wearing
and by night I'll whip you as well.
Yeah, you're wearing a latex suit by night. You're Combinatrix.
Numbers. Dr. Ernest Strauss, who had worked with both Einstein and Erdosh. I told you Einstein to come back.
And also has the most German name ever.
Ernst Strauss. It's probably Ernst Joachim Strauss.
Yeah.
He wrote a tribute to Erdosh shortly before his death, Strauss, in 83. And he said, in our century in which mathematics is so strongly dominated by theory doctors, he has remained the prince of problem solvers and the absolute monarch of problem posers. He went on to say he's the Euler of our time, which is a big call in maths. He's the Euler of our time. So basically, but here we get, coming back to that 30-page versus 2-line. Erdosh wanted to not only solve problems, he wanted them to be beautiful, elegant, simple, straightforward. So basically, he didn't care about the result unless it also sort of provided some understanding to the way you got there. And for him, it was about the aesthetics of it as well.
Oh, yes.
I know, it's just gorgeous. You just want to lick this, you know?
Yeah.
For him, he said it took on an almost religious significance. And Erdosh says, I'm not qualified to say whether or not God exists, and I kind of doubt he does. But apparently he believed that the mathematical truths are discovered, not invented. And the way he described it was there's some kind of great book in the sky maintained by God that contained the most elegant proofs of every mathematical problem. And he used to joke about what he might find if you could just have a glimpse at the book.
I get it.
According to him, you don't have to believe in God, but you should believe in the book.
I get it. No, I mean, this goes back to Descartes. You know, Descartes said, "Does a triangle exist outside the universe? Like, is a triangle a universal thing?" As you're asking about
Pythagoras. Yeah.
Well, Pythagoras invented triangles, and Descartes said, "Are they beyond even universal? Are they something outside of the universe?" And so Descartes said, "Can maths be a way to understand God?" And I get the way that those who are intensely versed in maths would go, you know what, maybe it is, maybe, because it's not inside the universe. And I was like,
it's bigger.
You know, maybe there's something there because does a triangle live in the universe? Are there other surely other universes have triangles? Like.
I'm still stuck on there's more than one universe, man.
Well, whether or not there is. But okay, if God is outside the universe, does God have triangles? Can God draw a triangle?
Does God have hands? He gave them to us, but does he have them?
I don't know.
That's so generous.
I don't know about hands.
I don't even have these myself.
At least triangles are mathematically definable. But I get what Erdosh is doing here. That he can be atheist in the way of being skeptical, but again going, yeah, but you know what? We're working towards something that is nothing to do with the physical. We're just working.
He had a reverence.
How much concepts can go all the way down to the bone? Like, wow, I get that.
It's exciting. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as he did, but it is exciting. So the other secret to his prolificity, proliferation...
Was it the coffee?
Rampant collaboration. You were asking about this earlier, and this is not my description. Rampant collaboration. So he would tirelessly collaborate with other mathematicians. Sometimes he'd have dozens working simultaneously, and he'd wander around them like a chess master.
I assume this is before the days of Zoom, where you just go from one Zoom meeting to the other.
Yes,
he's sitting in some sort of weird lab where they're all
the live flesh version of Zoom, and he'd wander around and basically he'd flick between there'd be 10 people working on that, 3 people on that, and just flick between problems, and talk to people. Then he'd wander off and leave them time to go, what just happened, man? How do we work this out? So apparently he was very demanding of himself as well. And there's a great quote from a guy called Mike Plummer. The first day we did mathematics until 1 a.m. I went upstairs to bed and he stayed downstairs in the guest room. At 4:30 in the morning, I heard pots banging in the kitchen. He kept banging them. It was his way of telling me to get up.
Is this his way of cooking? I'm banging pots together for you to put
waking people up.
Yeah.
It's literally, I stumbled downstairs about 6. What were the first words out of Erdosh's mouth? Not good morning or how'd you sleep, but let n be an integer. Suppose k is, and off he went. So literally, you're awake. Cool. Let's get into it.
You should try that tomorrow morning. Tomorrow morning when you're having breakfast.
God. Morning, honey. I mean, let n be an integer.
Let n be an integer. Don't.
What in the shit are you talking about, you monster? It's Saturday. So he collaborated with 509 authors. which is nearly twice as many as the next most well-connected mathematician.
To be honest, 509, and you said he did like 1,521 papers.
I did.
I'm surprised. I actually thought.
Well, I said this is collaborated, not necessarily published.
Oh, okay. So there might have been a bunch. Yeah, okay. He published 12 papers with Graham and 14 papers with Garibaldi.
Keith Janelle and
yeah. Cool. Okay. All right. Fair enough. All right. Fair enough.
And it's funny. So he collaborated so much that there was a measure that started to get created for the connectedness of the mathematician.
Number.
The Erdosh number. So he himself had a number of 0.
Of course, because he is Erdosh.
Yep. The 509 who'd co-written with him had a Erdosh number of 1. Anyone who had co-written an article with one of the group but not with Erdosh were 2, and so on.
So what's your Erdosh number?
I'm close to infinity. In fact, if you've never collaborated with him, you're infinity.
No. But if you've collaborated with someone who's collaborated with someone who's collaborated with someone who's collaborated with someone who's collaborated with someone, sure.
Apparently,
aren't there calculators?
So where do we get to? At the time of his death, 4,500 mathematicians had an Erdosh number of 2. So they'd published with someone who had published with Erdosh. 4,500 had an Erdosh number of 2. Speaking of his death,
I'm just stuck on trying to calculate my Erdosh number here. So I'm oh man,
I don't know. That'd be a lot.
There's a page where you
know.
can do it. You can. It's not like, if you'd like help in determining your Erdosh number, write us. No, I want a little online. Click a button.
This form and send $5,000. It's worse than genealogy.com.
But all people who've published have like an infinite. Everyone who's not published is infinite. Everyone who's published but is not part of the network. I mean, this is network studies. Has you're part of a different network, so it's infinite. Or if you're part of a very big network that includes Erdos at the center, you'll have a number, and it might be. You'd be surprised it wouldn't. It's hard to get super big. Like it's hard to be 1,000.
That's interesting.
It's like the 6 degrees of separation. So the Erdos number and the 6 degrees of separation are some of the big network sort of simple understandings. You know that if every person is 6 degrees of separation from anywhere else on the planet. So for Erdos number, it's kind of hard to get to mathematicians above 6. Like it's really really
I
hard.
can imagine that.
Even to go out to all other academics, it still gets really hard to get beyond 6 or 7 or 8.
How does that compare to 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, though? Because you
Same.
and I are both very close to that.
No, we're basically 0.
We're one off. I mean, we've met
have
Alan
podcasted.
Alda.
Yeah, have
we've
podcasted.
met Alan Alda, and he knows everyone in
so
Hollywood.
basically have podcasted with Alan Alda, so have podcasted with Kevin Bacon. So we have a Kevin Bacon number of...
he licked me. It's a different movie.
I get it. Yeah, so it's very hard to get a super huge number. But all right, I want to look it up.
Well, honestly, until I started looking into this guy, I'd never heard of the Erdosh number, but I don't care about academia. So unlike you, who's a scholar.
Oh, indeed.
You're scholaristic. So Erdosh and death. So apparently he would muse about the perfect death.
Is that his actual death? You mean actual death? Not
actual death.
Not stop doing maths. He's leaving, not doing maths.
Erdosh is leaving. So when he mused about his perfect death, according to his old buddy Graham, he had the room in his house and signed his checks, etc. He said it would occur after a lecture when he just finished presenting a proof, and a cantankerous member of the audience would raise a hand and say, "What about the general case?" And in response, Erdosh used to say he would reply, "I think I'll leave that to the next generation," and he would fall over dead.
I get it's nice to fantasize about your perfect death.
Sure.
But the end of a lecture and you get a cantankerous question and you say, "I'll leave that to someone." Why don't you have an awesome reply? You just go, voila!
I want other buggers to solve it. Yeah. My perfect death has nothing to do with maths or lecturing.
I kind of get what your perfect death is.
This is the wrong podcast for that.
Yeah, I know. I understand what your perfect death is.
It's to do with food. Oh, spoiler alert, nothing to do with food.
No, fair enough. I don't know if you want that for a perfect death. But anyway.
Oh, God, it'd be horrible. So he didn't quite get it perfectly, but as Graham put, he died with his boots on in hand-to-hand combat with one more problem. It was the way he wanted to go. So here's how it rolled. In March of 96, Erdosh lost consciousness while giving a lecture.
96?
Okay. 1996.
All right, cool. Yep.
So he lost consciousness while giving a lecture. After he regained consciousness a short time later, he asked the audience not to leave, insisting, "I have 2 more problems to tell you."
Oh, please tell me these are awesome, unsolvable problems.
Oh, I wish I knew. That was March. In June of 96, he was attending a conference. He was listening to someone called Gerhard Ringel deliver a talk. At the end of the presentation, he started to ask a question, but lost consciousness before he completed the question. He was rushed into surgery and had a pacemaker implanted. He managed to get to the conference closing dinner with heart surgeons in tow. And at the banquet, he introduced his heart surgeons, took a bow, and finished his question.
Oh, stop. This is so many academics. They dream. I'm dying for my art.
This is fapidemia. It's just insane. 20th of September, he actually left. He was 83. He'd had 2 heart attacks. And so the first unconsciousness was March that year. By September, that was it.
He should have posed an unsolvable problem. Like, he really should have set up a good
There are many things floating around that were unfinished, apparently, that have something to do with him. And including some unclaimed prizes and stuff. Like, he really didn't give a shit about cash. So he was putting into prizes all kinds of things. Some $1,000, some bigger. So he had his funeral was back in Hungary, in Budapest. His memorial had over 500 people at it, which is pretty cool. And he was cremated and buried next to his mum, which is nice and appropriate. Many mathematicians were still working on problems they had begun with him, and they reckon there were at least 50 to 100 papers with his name on them that were expected to be published after his death, at the time of his death. 50 to 100 left.
Wow.
And my favorite, he wrote his own epitaph. Now, my Hungarian is excellent, so I'll do it in Hungarian first.
Ah, yes, I know.
I
know it well. I know it well.
Finally, I'm becoming stupider no more.
Yes, I know it well. I was right. I responded correctly to the emotion.
I knew you would know that.
Wow. Oh.
So that's Erdosh. I know it's a long tail, but there's so much to it. It's impossible just not to. I trim shit.
That's amazing.
It's amazing.
Like, Prince of problem solvers.
Yeah. And problem posers.
Good on him. That's awesome.
Sounds wild.
I'm a big fan. I'm a big fan of the actual existence of genius because, I kind of feel so much it's just a thing made up by people that are lucky at their time. But the fact that there are some people who are deeply uninterested in the social and they go, no, nothing.
But I do wonder,
matters.
I hope they are genuinely uninterested, because otherwise it would be really quite a sad life if you were interested but didn't know how to interact. But it reads for this guy like he just didn't give a shit. It's not that he hated it. He just didn't fucking care. He cared about math.
Is that a tough question though? I mean, you pose that and you go, are we getting to a place in society where that person, that Paul, might be dealt with in a different way by his mother?
I'd be medicated for sure. He would have been locked up.
I think we're getting deep questions here.
But it's true. At least briefly, he would have been locked up. I saw no evidence of that happening.
The Wholesome Show is me. Kevin's me and him, Rod Lamberts, brought to you by the Australian National Centre for the Public Awareness of Science and
Eccentric Genius.
Eccentric Geniuses. Back next week, listener.